Let me just click. Got it. There we go. So we'll be recording, which means it'll be available after, which is maybe what some people are counting on. So I'm just going to take a quick look at participants, because I see some names. I see Claudia, who I know, and Roy, Shani. Hello, all of you. So nice to see you again. And not talking about Hebrew, although Hebrew is such a critical element of the mystic, and particularly when we get to Kabbalah. So this material it's boundless. There is so much. It is so rich, and it happens to be one of the things that I love to read. I don't often remember everything, so I make good notes, but it is very nourishing. I don't have the time, because it's a short class, to really find out where you're at, what brought you here, what your experience is. I'm hoping that it's not just an intellectual curiosity, although it can be, and it should be. Now I'm hearing somebody. Is that you, Hannah? Is everybody muted? I don't know who I'm hearing.
I'm not sure, but I'll make sure everyone's muted.
Okay. So I'm going to put the registration form aside. As you can see, there's a candle here. One of the things I wanted this class to be, and I think it was described, and that is that it's a left brain, right brain experience. To really understand and integrate material of any kind, when you can have something experiential as part of it, it becomes more real. It becomes more integrated into your being. And, this is a topic that's all about your being. It's about the soul. It's about the spirit. But even more than that, it's really about connecting to the Holy One. So this is very God-centered. So you may join a synagogue, you may consider yourself Jewish, you may consider yourself, cultural, you may consider yourself living out Reform Judaism. Not everybody believes in God, and we don't have the time to have that kind of conversation. But if you're going to study mysticism and Kabbalah, at the heart and the center of this material is God. It is truly God-centered. However, one of the important things to understand about this material is that even the Kabbalists, the mystics, the conventional rabbis, traditional rabbis, they all felt that what really counts is what we do in the world. Right? How we treat other people. Our relationship with the human being is really what comes first. And the model of that is truly Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah is teshuvah with other people. And in fact, the rabbis say, if you haven't done your work for Rosh Hashanah, don't come for Yom Kippur. Don't come to do your teshuvah with the Holy One. So Rosh Hashanah is focused on the human and the interactions and the relationships. Yom Kippur is about our relationship with the divine. So the foundation of who we are in this world is very much about our relationships. It's how we treat people. It's how we talk to people. So words and deeds and actions are really core to all of this. So let me just share a little bit, and then we'll light a candle. We'll just give a little bit of time in case somebody does want to show up. So Moshe Idel, who is a scholar who writes about Kabbalah and mysticism, he makes this distinction, which is similar to what I've been talking about, and that is that there is moderate and intensive mysticism. So moderate mysticism is much more intellectual. It's really the knowledge, understanding God in the world, how you affect change, how you affect the power of what is experienced in the world. Intensive mysticism is really experiential. I think the word intensive is a little strong, because what I am hoping, since we're going to do something experiential at the end of every class, is that you will feel some connection to not only what you hear, but somehow to your heart, to your spirit. And it doesn't necessarily have to be intense. So, it's his general breakdown. So let me just say a couple of things. As I said, it's a left-right brain experience. So learning, didactic, mystic, experiential. Hopefully this will expand your knowledge base and your awareness of yourself as well. I hope this is really inner-based, even though what we're talking about is a subject of God in the world. We're going to begin with prayer. I'm going to share that with you in a minute. And we're going to end with meditation. And I'm going to teach you a breathing technique, which actually my husband created, but it's become a very important part of my spiritual practice. I teach it to everyone, bar bat mitzvah kids, people who are taking spiritual practice with me. So I want to offer something which, of course, if you're not comfortable or you have your own practice, that's okay. But this class is to open you up, right? It's to open you up to different ideas and to different forms of practice and the tradition of mysticism in Judaism. Also the Torah. Torah is so critical to the mystic experience. And I'm going to show you and share with you some PowerPoints that I put together. So I'm also an artist. I'm a rabbi, I'm a cantor, I'm a Jewish artist. I used to make, in fact, if you've been to University Synagogue and you've seen their Torah covers, I made those. And there's a mezuzah. As you walk from one area to the other, the colorful mezuzah is something that I created. So being very creative, I have found that this platform that we've been on, the Zoom platform, has given me an opportunity to express my creativity in a very different way. And I'm hoping that it's going to touch you, because I really feel that, the ears and the eyes, these are the senses that are going to get awakened for you in this class. Let's see, what else do I want to make sure you know? Theosophical Judaism is really looking at the nature of the soul, which is based in mystical understandings of the relationship to God. And theurgy, which is another word you're going to hear, is how we move the Holy One. What is it in our behavior, in our words, that moves God? That's why we do blessings. Part of it is an awareness for ourselves of gratitude. Baruch atah Adonai, blessed are you. We're talking to God. Eloheinu melech haolam, we're not talking directly. We're saying, God, who is the king of the universe. And then we say something very particular, whatever that mitzvah is or whatever that ritual is. So we are constantly in communication with the Holy One. The mystic wants to communicate in a very different way, though prayers and blessings are very, very important. So let's begin. I'm going to get the prayer. And in fact, what I'm going to do now is, because I wanted you to see it, I'm going to share I have a couple of PowerPoints, because I want this to be a really rich experience for you. And we're going to do that. I'm going to make it a little bigger. So let's begin. This is really what mysticism is about. It's about things that are hidden, things that seem secret, that are unknown. They just sort of come into our consciousness, into our awareness. So the class is going to be about the mysticism, which is really what comes before Kabbalah. Kabbalah is an outgrowth, and practice is the other thing we're going to focus on. So let me just move myself. And prayer is very important in the mystic experience. It's how we speak to the Holy One. It expresses what is in our hearts, in our souls. So I'm going to light this candle. And light is very important in mysticism and Kabbalah. It all begins in creation, right? With the very, very first statement, let there be light. And what's interesting is the fourth day is when the moon and the sun and the stars are created. So the first day, it's a very particular kind of light. It's a spiritual light. It's a light that is so powerful that Adam could see from one end of the world to the other. So I invite you, if you wish, next week to bring your own candle. And I invite you, in the presence of your own space, to join in sharing in this blessing together. Because what we're doing is we're creating a kavanah. It's another important word. We're creating an intention. Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, we thank you for this opportunity to gather and to learn together. May it bring us knowledge and wisdom and clarity about who you are, the power of your intentions and your will and your supernal presence. May each of us expand and unify within ourselves through your divine virtues and your many names, and ultimately bring healing and wholeness to you, to ourselves, and to the world. We certainly know that this world needs it right now. May we each touch the sacred spark within, and like our ancient brethren, fulfill the holy work of honoring your glory by delving into the depths of your Torah and all of its mysteries, while we expand our own neshamas. So if you just close your eyes for a moment, this is part of the experience. When we talk about mysticism, is to go inward. Let those words sit inside of you. And which of them do you connect with? What is today about for you? Now we move on to this most important statement, which is in Psalm 16. To you, silence is praise. So singing, praying, dancing, those are all important ways of connecting with the Holy One. But silence, that is praise. That is the place that often we connect with God when we go inward. So I ask you to hold this, and it'll be part of our practice as we end the classes together. So one of the statements in Torah in chapter 2, verse 7, is a reminder of really the most intense connection between us and God is through the breath. And some of you may know this. If you can't breathe, if you've had COVID, if you have asthma, you know what that feels like. My husband has asthma and breathing issues, lung problems. There's nothing worse than feeling as if you can't have a breath in order to keep going, to keep thinking, to keep functioning. But what's important about this statement is for the mystic, it is a reminder of the absolute connection that we have with God. For it says that the Lord God formed man out of dust from the ground. So we are physical, we come from the earth, and then God breathed into the human's nostrils the soul of life, and the human became a living soul. So we are both from the heavenly sphere and the earthly sphere. And for the mystic, that's really important. We are ultimately connected to God at all times. Our very essence is divine. This is an incredible image. So I want you to just take a moment, if you would. And what I describe as breath is to receive. So the values of Judaism are taught through mystic and Kabbalistic terminology, but through the values of Judaism. So taking a breath is very different than receiving it, because it really is a gift. And when we take it, it's as if we're grabbing something. It's as if it belongs to us. It is a gift that is given. It's what keeps us alive, keeps our consciousness awake. So the Spirit of God, that is the breath in me. It's one of the ultimate connections that we make with the Holy One. Man's essence is rooted in divine emanation from the upper world, right, from heaven, and the body is particles of dust from the lower world. So for the mystic, we are a unification of all, above and below. And this is a reminder that when we die, what goes back to the earth, right, is the dust, the particles of dust of the body. But the essence of the divine emanation is returned to God. So if there is a way for us to deal with our fear about death, it is to really understand that we really don't die. The body does. It degenerates too as we age. And one of the things that I teach as a late bloomer is that the body can degenerate, but the spirit can keep expanding. Your being here today means that you are expanding your soul and your consciousness and your awareness. This is the theosophical study of which mysticism belongs. It's the nature of the soul based on mystical insight into the nature of God. And we're going to be exploring what is the nature of God, because that's the subject matter for the mystic. So I'm going to go past this. This is actually what we're going to look at towards the end. This is a diagram of the kind of breathing technique I'm going to be teaching you, which is what we call, my husband and call, divine CPR. And it's really what keeps us alive. And it's connected to 3 Hebrew words, but we're gonna look at that later. I want to move into more general mysticism. Words, deeds, actions enliven with spiritual vitality. And mysticism is really tapping into spiritual vitality. It gives purpose and meaning to what we say and how we act in the world. That's the hope. And this is that statement that I was beginning to explore with you, and that is that relating to the human is really where we start, and then we can relate to God. So God judges how we treat other human beings, not how we treat God. I mean, it's a very interesting concept, right? God doesn't judge how we relate to God. God judges how we relate to other people. And Torah is seen as a pathway to a deeper knowing. Torah is core for the mystic, And what we're going to see in our studies is that in the Torah itself, right, in the Torah are the roots, the seeds of mysticism. Usually the focus is post-temple. We're going to get there. But if you study some of the deeper secrets and you look at what these hidden jewels, and the mystery of God is in the Torah. Torah is how God speaks to us, and prayer is how we speak to God. So it's truly the platform of which all of this, as you see the sparks flying. So mysticism emerges as a response to being outside of the land of Israel. And, you know, it was believed that in Jerusalem, in the Holy Temple, was where you met God. But, you know, Torah is all about our travels to Israel. And so some of the key pieces that are the building blocks of mysticism are outside of the land. And then, as I said before, post-temple is when they see mysticism really emerge. And it comes out of something that Ezekiel the prophet imagines. So we're going to look at that later. But it's really important to understand that being in exile and knowing that God is present is really important. Wandering in the desert to after the destruction of the temple, you know, we're not in the land. And the key to Ezekiel's vision, which is grist for what you'll see Merkava mysticism, is that he isn't even in Jerusalem. He's exiled. He's on the waters, you know, the shore of Babylon. And when he has this unbelievable vision, which we're going to read together and look at some images, that is one of the important teachings that we receive. Because what is it telling us? It's telling us it doesn't matter where we are. God is accessible to us. God is with us. And there isn't anything that is more, I don't know if the word is comforting, or I'm not sure what it does for you. We can't explore it as easily because our time is so limited, but it's something for you to think about. What does it mean if you live, you know, in America, or you live in another country, or if you're exiled from your homeland, as some of the Ukrainian Jews will be? Is God with them? The wonderful picture, right, of gratitude and amazement. And this is really the core essence of mysticism, is bridging the gap with God. This is what the mystic wanted, to bridge whatever that gap is. And I apologize, there's an airplane overhead, and my hunch is you're hearing it. I apologize. So some things, I'm giving you some information that I wanted to share about mysticism. And it's really about achieving a higher supernal wisdom. It's expanding beyond, you know, what we know and what we see. You know, Rabbi Heschel always talks about radical amazement. The mystic lives in constant radical amazement. It's imbuing ritual and symbols with spirituality. It's having awe for the ineffable, the unspeakable, right? That which is unseen, that which is beyond the physical world. It creates heightened consciousness. The goal for each one of us, it's not just hopefully to learn some concepts, but it expands your awareness and your relationship and your interaction with the world and with others. It's about creating kavanah, and that's, you know, the candle is creating a kavanah for us in this moment, being together. It's an intention. And everything that we come to in daily living lets us tap into divine presence when we do it with intentionality. It's about expanding the soul, awareness of the living God, truly, the experiential part of Judaism. It is exerting an effort. So this is not simple. Looking deeper, looking beyond, using your senses or not, it's a kind of work that hopefully is rewarding, right? Because it feels enriching, it feels expansive, it feels nourishing. Experiencing embodied awareness of God. This is a big part of mysticism, and certainly the more intense experiential is about an embodied experience. And what does that mean? It can be anything from, Jewish yoga to how you walk when you exercise. It's the kind of inner work that I ask of you occasionally when you close your eyes and go inward and you feel things in your body. So Proverbs teaches, know God in all your ways. The mystic experiences and works at knowing God in every little thing that is done. It is using God's names for meditation, chant, prayer, or movement. So God has many, many names, and some of them actually are a little more important than others, and we're going to look at those later. For some, it's being in an altered state. I have never used drugs for that purpose, but I do know some rabbis who have spoken about achieving a more mystic experience in the days when they took LSD. Response to tragedy, alienation, and exile. So mysticism grows out of this reality, right? The tragedy of the Jews being alienated. I'm really sorry if you're hearing all of that. They're looking for somebody. They're hovering and calling out. So I'm not sure who it is. So exile is very important to the story of how mysticism evolves, because as I said, Ezekiel is in exile. He has this profound vision. And if we look at the symbolism, it's all built on the temple, because he was not only a prophet, but he was a Kohen. So he did work in the temple, and he was very familiar with all the elements, and they end up being symbolic elements in his dreams. Inspiration from the Bible, as I said, it truly has the roots, very, very deep roots of the mystic explosion, which comes much, much later. And we're going to look at some of the pieces in Torah. Nevi'im, of course, is where the prophets are, and Isaiah and Ezekiel are really key to these visions that open up something very unique that ends up being called Merkava mysticism. And then in the writings, so for those of you who are not familiar with the word Tanakh, you may or may not be, and I can't see you right now, so I just wanted to make sure you understood that the word Tanakh comes from the Tav for Torah, the Nun in Nevi'im, the Kaf in Ketuvim. So Torah, prophets, kings, and writings together create the Tanakh. And the Tanakh is filled with statements. And of course, there are scrolls. Pretty soon, we'll be looking at Esther, which is an important part of our ritual and our experience, and particularly right now, since we have a rather living Haman among us, or Haman. But the Psalms and Proverbs teach us much that the mystics use, because they often see those as a way in to meditate or to chant. It could be a word, it could be a letter, it could be a phrase. Very important, this concept of the world above and the world below. They are separate, but yet they are unified. Oh, this is Isaiah's statement from chapter 6, which is in the prayer book, the whole world is filled with his glory. So we're going to look a little closer at Isaiah later, but the rabbis, some struggled with the mystic concept, the behaviors, the practices, and they really wanted to control it and not let it infuse what we would call ordinary or general Judaism. But there were some that made sure that some of the statements that come from Isaiah and Ezekiel are in the prayer book, and we're going to look at that a little bit. So mysticism is how the mind uses imagination. It's a very imaginative and creative. There are abstract ideas, dreams, and it's a way to understand God through analogy or symbols. It's a very, very, very rich place that the mind goes. It creates intense personal devotional practice. Mysticism and Kabbalah calls on devotional practice. And it's not necessarily have to be intense. It's a question in a more general way, again, about kavanah and how we approach daily living, whether it's eating, going to the bathroom, cleaning. You know, I used to joke sometimes when people would have a discussion about ironing and washing that some of us actually enjoy it. And there's sort of this, in quotes, Zen experience. But, you know, this isn't really about Zen. This is about Judaism. It's about the kind of kavanah you bring to the moment and how it is a full experience. And we'll talk about that some more. Move me over here. So mysticism and Kabbalah are filled with paradoxes and opposites. And these are some examples: good and evil, joy and suffering, light and dark, what is known and revealed and what's unknown and hidden, male and female, transcendence and immanence. So these are all very important and rich concepts that we could talk about a lot. I'm trying to give you an overview, but I want to say something about light and dark, because, you know, our day begins in darkness. You know that. And then in the morning, which is called shacharit, which literally means from the dark. So what we're talking about is that we begin in the dark. It becomes this incredible metaphor that from that darkness emerges light. And to me, it's one of those statements in Judaism that is a metaphor for life. There's a lot of darkness, there's a lot of difficulty that we do face in our lives. We're seeing it in the community, we're seeing it in the world. And it's not easy, right, to live with it and get through it, but we have to have a sense that somehow we're going to move through it and hold on to our resilience and our strength, and it will move towards something better. And may not even be better, but something different. It's not always better. Sometimes it's just something different. But we're going to see more of this concept, particularly in Kabbalah. I don't know, I'm having trouble moving this down, and I've got this thing here in my way. So it's an emphasis, right, on the inner workings of our relation with God, on direct and intimate consciousness of the divine presence. So again, mysticism is about knowing God, feeling God, being aware of God. It is religion in its most acute, intense, and living stage. It is, again, experiential. It is knowing God through experience. And that's why I want to bring, you know, some moments together of inner work and sharing as a group where we can experience what might feel like the divine. Psalm 34 reminds us, taste and see that Yod He Vav He, that God is good. So that might be something the mystic would actually meditate on. And if we had more time, we would just kind of delve into these places together. And this comes from Gershom Scholem, again, another scholar, writes a lot about mysticism and Kabbalah. And this comes actually from Major Trends. Being mindful is very important for the mystic. And Shaviti Adonai Lenegdi Tamid is a statement, again, that we find in our text. I always set God before me. If I'm not mistaken, that's in your sanctuary. I know there's a statement that was created. I can't remember. I haven't been in your sanctuary in a long time, but I think that that's it. And these are just some of the statements that we have in our tradition that a mystic or Kabbalist might use as a chant, or just close their eyes and tap into it, seeking the refuge in you, God, being reminded that God guides us. I just spoke at length for a very kind of special birthday that I had, and I created a video and I talked about feeling God's hand on my shoulder. I've often felt, and I'm sure some of you have, there's something that moves you, that takes you along, that reminds you, as well as all those angels, right, that come into our lives unexpectedly, and some things are different or the path shifts. So you guide me. Being mindful of God's presence. Your presence is perfect joy. Knowing before whom you stand is a very important statement. Know before whom you stand. And God is always at my right hand. So these are statements in our tradition that become a guidepost, right, for the mystic or the Kabbalist. So it is a world of imagination, creativity, of dreams and visions, and what I call fantastical imaginings. It's a process in which we decode the mystery of the divine. We penetrate the depths of consciousness, of language, of Hebrew, which is just absolutely a critical element in how they understood the world, creation. It's this unbelievable symbolism. It transcends literal, what we might call normal Judaism. It's what we know and see may not actually be reality, according to the mystic and the Kabbalist, but reality is what we know, and what we try to do in the mystic studies is go beyond that, to reveal what is hidden, to go beyond time and space of this world, to fade the boundaries and the distinctions. So as I showed you before, there are paradoxes and there are opposites, but we try to find a way to unite opposites to get a balance point, and Kabbalah speaks to that. And we're going to look at examples of that. Deconstructing boundaries of the world in which we live so we can burst through the limitations of time and space and create new constructs that's beyond the empirical, the plausible, and what's revealed. That's a big statement. And studying mysticism or Kabbalah can just be, learning what it means and what people do. But if in fact the right brain wants to be involved, you have to work at doing that. You have to work at dissolving separation and boundaries and limits somehow so that you can construct for yourself something more expansive. And I'm hoping this class will begin that process, transcending the demarcation between what's prohibited and permitted, what's revealed and hidden, what's human and divine, focusing on the mysterious realm, on mystery, right? The unknown, living with contradictions and ambiguities. Mysticism and Kabbalah tells us that we have a lot of that. And we do. We have to live with things that don't make sense. And they are expressed in a visionary language, in descriptions that defy limits. So we're going to see some images, which I'm going to share, which really hopefully will spark your imagination and your consciousness. So let me just move me. I'm floating around here. So in the Torah, there are a number of places where the mystical happens. And of course, this is the classic story, right? When Moses is drawn to look, he turns and he sees this bush aflame, but it's not burning up. What is that if it's not mystical or mysterious? And out of it, Moses says to God, "Behold, when I come to the children of Israel and I say to them, the God of your forefathers has sent me to you," they're going to say to me, what's his name? What am I supposed to say? Because Moses doesn't know God's name. And this is a name that is given once, only in this place. Eheyeh, Asher Eheyeh. So we have, this image in and of itself, the flame and the fire, as we lit the candle, acknowledges, is the power of light, the power of the flame. And what comes out of this is this expression, which is a verb, and it's a future tense. Eheyeh means I will be. For some, I will become. Eheyeh asher eheyeh. I will be that which I will be. I will become that which I will become. I mean, this is such a powerful statement that God is saying to Moses. I am this transformative being. Oh, I hope, I don't know, I obviously can't get an answer from you, but I just hope that this is not too disturbing. I can't believe that they're looking for somebody when I'm teaching mysticism here. But this is what we can't control in life. Eheyeh, Asher Eheyeh is about transformation. And Moses is saying to the people, this God who's transformative, this is the God that has sent me, because you are going to be transformed. Remember, we are created in the image of the Holy One. They don't understand that yet, and they don't know it. I'm not sure they ever do. It's a very sad story about this particular generation who have lived as slaves, but they have PTSD, right? They have suffered for hundreds of years. But knowing a God with a name that is, I'm going to be what I'm going to be, I'm going to become what I'm going to become, this is the heart and soul of mysticism and Kabbalah. It's all about change, transformation, potential. And so this name is really important. And this is an incredible name to meditate on. And if we have more time, we'll be able to do some of those things together. Oh, I got to move me again. So mysticism is traveling in the mind, in the consciousness, right? Having visions, meditating, contemplating. It's all about these journeys, these flights, right? Ascending and descending, entering and exiting. It's watching and listening. It's exploring. It's envisioning. It's imagining, reconfiguring and transforming the past into a new perspective. I mean, these are values and ways of being that we need, right? This is the kind of stuff that feeds us and supports us and reminds us of our potential. Mysticism, creative, visionary, coping process And as I said, much of this emerges out of the pain and the suffering of exile, overcoming the barriers and the distance between the individual and the absolute, a way to connect and find union with the divine, a way to cope with destruction and loss, persecution, expulsion, and exile. I mean, those are all heavy duty words, right? And we know people right now who are going through that. That's just, as we talk and we study this, the Ukrainians are feeling this and going through it. It's personal, it's national, it's physical, it's emotional, suffering and despair. And mysticism and Kabbalah is finding a way to kind of support, nurture, heal, renew ourselves in the middle of all that kind of shit that people go through, that we all go through. It's a way to reintegrate lost objects and rituals into new personal ways. It's a way to improve and contact the inside, expand the consciousness, the wisdom, the understanding. And when we get to Kabbalah, we're going to be using those words, because what are we talking about? We're talking about right brain, which is Chokhmah, left brain, which is Bina. And for some of you, those are words that make no sense, but they will when we get to Kabbalah. It's about harmonizing and finding comfort in these paradoxes, in these oppositions, and in the unknowns. So it's a great gift if we can find a way to incorporate the wisdom, the pathways, the spiritual practice that mysticism and Kabbalah opens up for us. Got to move me again, sorry. So there are a number of different books on mysticism, but one of them presents 5 categories. Remember we talked about the 2 that Moshe Idel presents. This is a little more of a breakdown. So normal mysticism is about recognizing God and God as part of how we live and awareness of daily living. This is a very important word in mysticism and later in Kabbalah, devekut. It means to cleave. It means to cling. In fact, I believe in Hebrew, in Israel, glue, I think is called davak. It's about the most intimate closeness that one can have with the divine presence. And that's what the mystic wants. That's what the Kabbalist wants, to have the most intimate connection. It's like a man and woman. It's like male and male, female and female. The categories of couples and relationships are so different than in the period of when this was written. So you will hear me talk about male and female. That is Kabbalah, in the Middle Ages. And we have to accept what our tradition presented at its time. And of course, massage it and shift it and change it. But this is very particularly in the text in Genesis when it says a man leaves his family. And what does he do? He cleaves to his wife. The male-female image is Kabbalistic. But in a way, it also is going to speak about the individual, that we are both male and female. And the God that Kabbalah talks about is a God that is male and female, okay? Transcendent and immanent. But what's important is they need to be unified. So when we talk about couples making love on Shabbos, it's because the underlying mysticism and Kabbalah is that what we do down here affects what goes on up there. So the heavenly couple is called the Kadosh Baruch Hu and Shekhinah. So Shekhinah is the female indwelling of God, and that's immanent. Kadosh Baruch Hu is beyond, transcendent, but our job is to bring them together. So what happens in mysticism, which is about trying to find closeness and an attachment to God, emerges in Kabbalah about bringing the two parts of the Holy One together. I hope that makes sense. Let's continue. So mainline Kabbalah is a third kind of mysticism, which emphasizes theurgy, the power to affect God's inner life. It's about knowing the nature of God and how we can impact it. Just checking my time. Oh my goodness. Affective Kabbalah is about our actions and how they do also impinge in the higher world, but it tends to depend more on magic. And in the Hasidic movement, it was about the tzaddik, who was the center and the channel for divine grace. And the fifth one, which is what I would call the most intense, is prophetic and ecstatic mysticism. So this is union with God through revelation or prophecy. It's learning the secrets of the Torah. It's connecting to the prayers of the angels. And it's very much, when it says ecstatic, it's about the kind of chanting, the kind of movement that really was ecstasy. Rachel Elior is, again, in Israel. She writes a lot about mysticism. And this is what she had to say. Transcend the demarcations, which we talked about, between prohibited and permitted. So we sort of looked at that earlier. Living with paradox, contradictions, ambiguities. And then she refers to the Merkavah, which is something she writes about, and we're going to look at that either today or next week. The great thing is Merkavah work. And the Merkavah is, we were talking earlier about Ezekiel and his vision. His vision is what brings Merkavah, mysticism, into reality. It's post-temple. It actually begins, the mysticism begins a little bit in the Second Temple period, but really flowers post, because these visions begin when they're in exile, when they see the destruction of the temple, when they feel that God has disappeared, because that's where God was. Wise is one who understands himself and is allowed to study the work of Merkavah. So we're going to talk about that. Talmud has very strong feelings about this kind of work and this kind of mysticism. We'll look at that later. This is actually a piece from Talmud that says, they may not expound upon the subject of forbidden relations in the presence of three, nor the work of creation in the presence of two, not the work of the chariot in the presence of one, unless a sage really understands themselves. So this was perceived as being dangerous, and people who needed to have the appropriate preparation or understanding, the knowledge, experience, you needed to be at, classically, you've heard, you don't study Kabbalah till you're 40. I mean, it's a metaphor for maturity, for being married, for having children, all the things in life that one needs to experience. You have to have done that before you can open yourself up to these mysterious places. And since time is passing quickly, let me see. This is a picture of the Mishkan, and I put this in here. So the mysticism draws on history, it draws on religious ceremony, on archetypes, ancient symbols, sacred traditions, ceremonies and language, yes. And I did put some of the symbols down here, but it's very important to understand that the Mishkan, the traveling sanctuary in the Torah, in the desert, is what eventually evolves into the temple. So many of the symbols that we talk about in the temple really are rooted here. And one of the important paradoxes or divisions is what's hidden in here and what is exposed here. So the altar is here, and this is what the people could see, right? Because this is how the people connected to Judaism. The mysticism we're talking about is another level of connecting with our tradition and with God. So the way they spoke to God was how they brought their gifts of their animals, and they were slaughtered by them, given to the priest, and here is, where the offering is made. The whole connection of the people with God is through this. What's hidden is where the Kohen would go, the priest. But what it does, it creates this opposition of what's revealed and what's hidden. But when they took it apart, it traveled and they could see what was inside. They saw the ark that came out. They saw the cherubim, the angels that were on top of the ark. They saw the menorah. They saw the table of the bread. They saw the altar where they would do the incense. So this is really very important to understand that it all begins in Torah. So I believe, so let me, as a last picture here, one should not expound on the Merkavah. Again, in Talmud, this kind of flights of fancy and Ezekiel's kind of visions is not something that the rabbis wanted the average person to be involved with. Certainly not women. We know this was a man's activity, and we'll talk about that some more. But what I want to do is stop for a moment because we're going to learn this breathing technique. Did I put stop sharing? Yes. Hi. So I know that was a lot. And before we go on, I just want to take a moment in terms of just being able to breathe. Those of you who are here, does anybody have something they would like to share or say or ask at this minute? Because what we're going to do is we're going to go back. I'm going to teach you a breathing technique, and we're going to work on it a little bit together because I want to end in something experiential. In reactions, you probably know this by now, there's a raise hand. And if nobody wants to speak, I'm fine because we only have 15 minutes left. It goes so quickly. Anybody? Let me just, I'm going to go to gallery for a second and see who I see. Some of you are hidden, but hello. Can anybody just share with me, be willing to share with me how it felt to be exposed to this kind of information, to those images, did it tap into anything at all for you? Anybody? Stacy, hi. Yeah, unmute and share. Yeah, I know this is the.
I would just say, just in general terms, all of the concepts they're soothing and calming is sort of the response or the reaction I had, that there was a calming quality to it, a soothing quality to just kind of take yourself into some of these concepts.
Oh, thank you. I feel that way. I am immersed all the time in reading and in the work that I do. I work in a small congregation. It feels like a very part-time position. But in the work that I do, the images, the concepts are really important to me in how I share what I share and infusing it, because I do believe it is very calming. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? So if nobody's has an urgent need to speak. Yes, somebody want to say something?
Claudia, I think.
Claudia. Hi, Claudia.
Hi.
Hi.
Very quickly, it's a lot of these concepts also resonate in Eastern traditions, and I was wondering if there's an interconnectedness there. If what came first, and also I had a quick question. Beside the Hasidic movement, are there any other traditions of Judaism that embrace mysticism?
Well, in terms
As
of
as an ongoing practice?
it's an ongoing practice. Well, there are, in terms of contemporary times, there are, I would say, small groups of people who either have found a master and study, or they're in some kind of a healing group or a learning of Kabbalah or mysticism in which they have an opportunity to tap into this. In terms of the movements, it begins after the destruction of the temple, but there is a book that follows, which we're going to look at a little bit, Sefer Yetzirah, which is a foundational piece for Kabbalah. And then that kind of moves into the Middle Ages when Kabbalah flourishes and the Zohar is written. And so there are people who teach, some Zohar, and Matt translated everything into English, so it's available. The Kabbalah Center picked up on it. The problem I have with the Kabbalah Center is they make it very universal, and they turn some of the symbolism into or away, I would say, from Jewish meaning and purpose. But after the Middle Ages, it moves to Safat in Israel, and there are a number of Kabbalists who then carry the tradition. Something then happens later, I'll talk about it when I do Kabbalah, that really turns the rabbis and the people away from this material, because two people actually do, I don't want to say dangerous, but they turn away from Judaism as a result of their involvement in it. So it sort of goes dormant until the Baal Shem Tov, who kind of reawakens it. And it becomes very key in the Hasidic movement. And the rabbi who writes the Tanya, Shneur Zalman of Ladi. And then there are a couple of rabbis who bring it into like the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Zalman Schachter, I just blanked on his first name, Green, Rabbi Green. Who else? Shlomo Carlebach. They begin this movement, which is what turns into the renewal movement. So any rabbi who kind of emerges from the renewal movement is teaching this, is encouraging it, and bringing it into the fold. So there are various people, in communities throughout the United States and Israel who are keeping this alive and teaching it in a little different way, to make it fit our times. But as far as the first question, in the Torah, Abraham has two sons, right? And Ishmael is sent off, and it says he went to the east. And some people say that he took some of the mystical pieces from his father, and it got moved into, I guess, eventually Hinduism. But, our mysticism does go back officially to the destruction of the temple. But when we will look at things in the Torah, we will see that the seeds are really planted. And of course, that information gets, spread throughout the world. I can't tell you exactly when Hinduism takes sort of credit for their beginnings, but ours really does go back, to some say Abraham, Ezekiel, So well over, 3,000 years. So it's very old. Is it the same? Yes and no. The tree of life in Kabbalah is not the same as the chakras. It's just not. And is the goal the same? Yeah, to be unified with the Holy One, if you want to make that a general concept and everybody has their own God. There is some similarity, but we have very unique teachings and concepts that are really different from Hinduism and Buddhism. So what I want to do, because we don't have a lot of time, I'm going to go back and share with you, let's see. I need to close this. I need to share again with you something. Where is it? We're going to go back to the beginning, and I want to share this with you. So I want us to work on this a little bit before we end, and this is the divine CPR. And I talked about receiving the breath. So if you look at this chart, and what I will do now that I have the emails is I will send you a copy. Ruach is a Hebrew word. It means wind or spirit. Some people say breath. On this side of the triangle is nefesh. Nefesh in biblical Hebrew in the Torah is really about the body. It's about the energy and flow of physicality. Neshama is spirit. It is the soul. It is the God spark. This breathing technique is based on the Star of David. It's half a star. It is a triangle. This side right here is the in-breath. It's the inhale. It is what we receive from the Holy One. This side, now, ruchi just means it's mine. So the E ending on these words, it's not ruach, which is a general word. It is now ruchi. So if you imagine this, it's going to be ruchi. Nafshi, my energy flow, is the exhale. It's the expire. So we have inspire and we have expire. And ultimately one day we will expire. We will have our last breath. The third part of this is the important part. It is a pause. It is not needing to grab another breath. It's being in that place that you've mentioned, some of you, hum. And it's called nishmati. So I think somebody needs to mute, but I want you each to say this after me. Ruchi.
Ruchi.
Yeah, I'm hearing somebody. I'm going to need, who's talking? Somebody needs to actually mute because it'll be hard to lead the meditation. Nafshi. Nishmati. So this is a three-sided breathing technique. So I want you to close your eyes because I'm going to guide you. And I want you to just take a cleansing breath, just let it out. And then through your nostrils, the way it says in Torah, that God blew into the nostrils the soul of living. You receive, you inhale, and in your mind, just think ruchi. If you need to say it, you can say it. Nobody will hear you. Ruchi. And then exhale. Return back nafshi. And then just take a pause. Just hold for that moment the gift of life and the return back to God. Ruchi. Inhale, receive this incredible gift, this divine presence that fills every single cell, and then return it back. Exhale. You are partners with the Holy One, and so you are feeding the world. You are feeding everything that's green. You receive oxygen, that's your gift, and then you give back this gift, carbon dioxide. And then you pause and you realize that the spark of you is God. The essential core of your uniqueness is the gift of divine presence. And then you receive again Ruach Elohim, the wind, the spirit of the divine, as it fills your consciousness. It clears out the cobwebs. And then you return back in gratitude for what you have received, what we call divine CPR, what keeps you alive. And then you pause. You accept this gift and this relationship and this divinity that you are a part of, and it is a part of you. Let's continue just for a moment. The receiving, the returning, and then the pause. This is God-centered breathing. Taking a moment of Kabbalah on the breath. Intentional. And it is being aware of the gift that we receive that we don't focus on or take time to even think about. So we've come to the end of the class. I hope you hold this incredible feeling of connection with your own divine spark, the gift of breath, this renewal, and some of these incredibly expansive ways of thinking and seeing and feeling. And we'll continue this next week. And I'm very grateful that you came. So thank you so much. It is a real gift to me to be able to share this with you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Blessings to everyone.